Um, oh, yeah. Okay. So this evening, I had a few things I wanted to make sure that we worked on, and but I wanted to start. You know, most of you who have been around me for any amount of time know that one of the things that I learned a lot through the kung fu was is that it helped me retrain how I thought about things or how I saw things. I didn't really um, I didn't really know what I didn't know until I saw what I didn't know, right? But sometimes that took a while. And the reason that comes up in the Tao Te Ching, verse 41, it says something along the lines of that the wise student hears of the Tao and they practice diligently. The average man, the average student will hear of the Tao and practice every now and then. And the stupid one will hear of the Tao and laugh. Well, I was the laugher in the beginner until I get my ass whipped, and then all of a sudden I start to practice, right? But then later, and that's what most of when you hear me refer to frying pan therapy, that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes we don't wake up until nature smacks us in the face, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I don't know what you're trying to tell me, but I will figure it out, right? So one of the things that later comes on in that same verse, it'll say that the great the great music is nearly inaudible, or so that it's almost unhearable, and that the great image has no form. It's almost invisible. The great image is invisible. There's several translations of the character, but they both kind of mean the same thing. It's not what you might think, what you see, or what you hear. Now that is a philosophical, what they would call philosophy. But Sifu Chin, because of something like that, is present in every one of your Chinese martial arts, but particularly of Tai Chi. And so you had to be physically able to interpret what other people call philosophy. And when you can physically interpret it, it's no longer philosophy, it's now in theory, because I can prove it to you. It's not something that you can just argue with me about. So tonight, as part of the practice, I'm going to tell you this in the beginning. You know, the great image is formless, it's nearly invisible. The great music is almost inaudible. And then what we'll do is we're going to work in that theme throughout the rest of the practice. Okay? So let's first start with a little posting. Because if our mind ain't right, the body ain't worth a spit. All right. Palms up and out. That was a quote from Clint Eastwood. If he wasn't Dow, I don't know who was. Rolling around. Pale rider, baby. Hold the moon. Man, that sunshine feels good on your face, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. If you're, if you can hold your arms here, that's fine. If this becomes uh, too much of a strain, then just let the hands lower to in front of your lower abdomen. Let's just take a couple of minutes. I used to wonder why Lao Tzu would have written things so, what seemed to be so cryptic. Or perhaps why the guys from the 1800s who was trying to translate his work translated it so cryptically. I later became to realize that the guys who were translating it was just doing the best they could. They didn't understand it either, but they were trying to find words that made it seem like translated into English had some sense of poetry or made some sort of relevant sense, like art. Fortunately, through a lot of time and effort, soaking, as Sifu would say, I realized that not as much of it was as cryptic as I had thought. The real problem was is that I was a hammer, and if it didn't look like a nail, I couldn't recognize it. Perhaps it was a cultural barrier, an intellectual barrier, a translational barrier. There's so many options. But just like most pieces of art, you take a few moments, you might have a slight reflection of what the artist was trying to portray or trying to share, trying to tell you what they saw. Let your palms come to rest down in front of your lower abdomen, holding, holding your form. And through the course of time, y'all have heard me say different things, things that I've been shared with and seen and observed and felt. And one of those is that great depth is a form of simplicity. And with simplicity, you can find great depth. Oh, stand up nice and tall and try to physically interpret that. I don't know what to call it, except the fact that it's just things I would chew on, right? That you'd read it, see if it would tell you to read something, and it made absolutely no sense. And then sometime down the way, it would make sense. So for some of you, I'm quite sure me giving you the simplicity, that great depth is almost a symbol or a conduit to simplicity. And with simplicity, you can find great depth. Uh, Now, that's all well and good in the philosophical realm, and in places that you might, want to chew on it. There's lots of folks who enjoy that kind of stuff. I hate it, because if I can't use it, it's trivia, and I have no place in my life for trivia. I got enough shit to carry around, much less something I'm not going to use. Um, but the nice thing with this is we'll translate it. Come here, Ryan. So perhaps the simplest technique in all martial arts, he already knows what it is on in Tai Chi. I mean, it can't get much simpler than this. Now, one of the things that you learn is that what I can make and feel and look simple, that you might look at and go, okay, well, yeah, I can do that. That is right on the cusp. You're getting ready to walk through the door. Because when you say to yourself, I'm pretty sure I can do that. Now you're knocking on the door of that. The great music is inaudible, and the great image is invisible. Because even though you see what I'm doing, you can't see what I'm doing. And even though he can feel what I'm doing, he can't feel what I'm doing. Would you be? Yeah. And if you've experienced me laying this on you the first few times, that's exactly what you go through. You're now living in verse 41. And the smart student will practice it thereafter diligently. The average student will practice it every now and then. And the silly ass student, who I'm not going to waste much time with, will just say, okay, I'll just practice maybe if he's watching. Okay. So the idea is that when you're practicing, for example, on the simplest technique of all, to make it feel and look correct, takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of work to make what you can see and what looks simple to feel correct to a student who understands what it's supposed to sound like, what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like, because he knows now at this point not only what it's supposed to look like, feel like, be like, is he can also do it. That's verse 41. The simplicity has a great amount of depth. But if you will stay simple, you can find the depth. You can relax. Okay. Does that make more sense to you now? Okay. In each one of the northern styles, Tai Chi Chuan, Xingyi Chuan, Xingyi, or Yichuan, and Bakua Zhang, they all comply to that. Bakua almost all the time, but not all the time. All 5 elements of the Xingyi hands, that is, you're living in it. Okay. And then in select pieces of your Tai Chi, like the one I just demonstrated. Okay. There's some other examples I could give you, but that's the simplest one of all for me. All right. So what I'd like to do also is we're going to take another piece that you were working. No, y'all didn't work on this. You and I did. Okay. You have though. All right. 2 of the simplest stances we have in all the Kung Fu: horse stance, bow stance. Okay. Let's just everybody check yourself. There's a horse stance. I'm going to face this way here. There you go. Thank you. Come over this way some, Ryan, so that they can see you. Okay. Horse stance. And then turn your belly button right, or y'all follow, TV land, follow Ryan. Okay. And go into a bow stance. Ryan, you're going to come this way. Your other right.
It's reversed on TV.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm facing this way. Yeah. All right. Horse stance. Good. Yeah, you're with them, right? So that's the 2 stances: a horse stance and a bow stance. Looks pretty simple. Okay, yeah. Okay. There you go. Good. Now, what we want to do is now to create Kung Fu out of this is this comes out of the Choli foot Kung Fu. Yeah, you recognize, right? All right. But the idea here is that when you turn, you're supposed to advance. So when I turn my belly button, those of you following and if y'all watching Ryan, you'll notice that both of our feet move. Y'all are coming this way. So like so. There you go. TV land. There you go. And then when I turn back into my horse, boom. You're going to see Ryan and I cross because he's going that way. But the main thing is that each time I move out of my horse stance and bow stance, I'm advancing. Okay. Now let's go the other way. Get into a horse. And now we're going to turn in the other direction. Horse, bow. Bow, horse. Bow, horse. Okay. And rest. Very, very simple exercise. But it can change everything, because the one thing that you all are still working on a lot is the simple concept of making your middle run the show. Okay. So Ryan, if you don't mind, face again. So if you're watching and you're practicing, you're not trying to move your feet. That's not going to get you what you want, even though it's a step in the right direction. You have to move your waist, and then your feet move. And then I move my waist, and then my feet move. I turn and I go. All right, let's go back the other way. Boom. Now you can practice this up and down hallways. All the folks who were at the Carthage Queen on Saturday, this is all we did for about the hour, right? You know, footwork. And then all of those at the Pinehurst classes, that's all they wanted to do yesterday, was to work on just this technique. because they finally realized that it's a skill. And if you can have the skill, then your Kung Fu all overall, whether it's Tai Chi or anything else, will also get better. So when you're practicing something like the fire set, you start off in a horse and then you're over and above. And what I'm looking for you to do is to learn how to move your waist. Yeah, that's much better. Yeah, because then everything begins to smooth out. And as it smooths out, you have now lived in that verse because you became the invisible. You became the person that starts in their Kung Fu and their Tai Chi, for example, and the person that we see 2 years later has evolved, even though the technique never changed. You became inaudible. You became invisible. The real Kung Fu you can't see anyway. You've heard this over and over again. That's exactly where that comes from. The real Kung Fu you can't see. You can barely you can feel what I've done to you, but you can't feel how I did it. And that takes another level of work. All right, so let's finish up with the fire set. About 7-8 teal. That feel good? Okay. So what? We'll switch. You just stay there. Y'all gonna follow Ryan this time. TV Land will follow me. I don't know why haven't we done it like this before? We always are on the other side of each other. We end up anyway. We'll figure it out. Different skill. That's right. Thinking outside the box. Side-itis. All right. All right. Look at Bob. Huh? All right. Hands float. And think about that verse as you're moving, making it art. Without any rush. Reaching out, roll the hands over, sitting back. And the left hand floats. And pressing. Washing the back of the hand. Exhale. Hold the moon and sitting back. Good, tall, proud spine. Rotate. Separate the clouds. Stepping out a little bit. Reach out. Reel the silk. Roll and pull back. Bend the knee. Pressing out. Bend the knee, sitting back. Good. Good. From here, I'm going to sweep over. And God, empty the hands. Float to the corner. Turn. Open up. Crinkles wings. And floats. Good. Sweep over to the side. Draw it in. Extend the knee. Shift the weight. Turn the waist. Good. There, bend the rear knee, sitting back. Empty the hands, float over. Good. Then coil the waist, turning the belly button. Exhale, open. Good. From here, everything goes back to neutral. Then listen to the seashell. Good. Rise it up. Put the foot back. Sitting back. Good. And from here, listen to the seashell again. Brush knee. Raise it up. Golden rooster. Foot back. Heel of the foot. Sitting back. Let's just take a breath right here. Reminding ourselves that, when we're in stillness, we begin to gather ourselves. The mind comes in. When we start to move the body a lot or continuously or intensely, the yang begins to spin up. Takes quite a while to be able to monitor that during movement. Sometimes the only time you can tell that you're spinning is when you try to be still. Let the hands float back. Then they empty. Backhand. The yang hand pulls. Good. From here, the white snake stretches out. So now the yang hand pulls. Snake rolls through the grass. And then flicks its tongue. The hand floats under the elbow. And on. Good. Reach out and up. Reel the silk. Pull, turn, down. Hand floats up. Shift your weight forward. Backhand. Inner. Snake stretches out. And it rolls in the grass. And then flicks its tongue. Coil up. And out. Sitting back, turn, push the sky. Take a pause right there. Just take a breath or two. Never in a rush, never in a hurry, never any slack. Extend the leg out a little bit, sit down, gather the clouds, bring it up. Good. What'd you think? 6 o'clock on the dot, baby. Look at that. Didn't even have to look at the end. All right. Any comments or questions or about the lesson for this evening? So just as a takeaway, a lot of things the Tao Te Ching will apply when you first hear them. They usually sound mystic or, like something that, I'm making up just to torture your brain, right? But in reality, eventually we'll come around to where you're physically doing exactly what it is we spoke about. And so this night, the main thing is whatever you do in your life, look for the art in it. Look for what's invisible in it. Because if you can see someone else do it and you're doing the same thing, whether it's playing a guitar, painting a tree, it doesn't matter. If you want it, you're going to have to look deeper than just the technique of a stroke or your martial art. All right.